The portrayal of black in the film industry. Hello, my name is Azan Rashid. I am a freshman 2029 student at UC Berkeley, and I'm taking Thien Hong Villarreal's sociology class at the FPF program. Here's an abstract. The film industry has a racist way of portraying black people and culture on the big screen and does so by various ways that will be mentioned in the slideshow. Structural racism is a big concept talked about in great detail. Assimilation was needed to adjust to this new unequal treatment experienced. Research topic and significance slash purposes. The research topic is how the implications of structural racism shape the portrayal of African Americans in the film industry through stereotypes, unequal practices, and blackface. The topic is significant for a couple of reasons. It showed how racist the casting process was in the older ages and how impactful the prejudice was to the members of the African American community. Um, so that brings me to my research question. Throughout the course of time with the media and film industry, how were African Americans depicted? Are there any similarities, comparisons, or patterns playing a role in structural racism? Structural racism is like a hurricane. It drives a constant, irreversible wedge of chaos and prejudice into society with no return. It is a combination of chaotic patterns of structural racism that creates unequal treatment everywhere, particularly with the African Americans portrayed in the film setting. The world famous film industry cares about what it is being put on to the big screen to show society with no regard to how offensive it might be. Structural racism refers to a large group or institution within society that promotes discrimination primarily due to the historical context of the United States, where African Americans were born into slavery and viewed as property due to the inequality. As a result, they face severe discrimination from society and the film industry and were portrayed as unequal, which is a throughout the course of time, African American individuals were portrayed as unequal, which is a pattern that occurs with stereotypes, white individuals playing black roles, and the lack of diversity. Throughout the course of time, people of African American descent in films were portrayed as unequal, which is a pattern of stereotypes. A stereotype is an overgeneralized opinion, often seen not just in the film industry, but in society as a whole. This is a topic that primarily came out of the slavery movement on a larger scale because African Americans are portrayed as property with the development of the hierarchy system, much like the Spanish caste system with the Creoles and Peninsulares. According to the excerpt titled Racism in South Africa Cinema, Keon Thomaselli states racism then in the South African context is not simply an irrational prejudice sparked by racial and cultural differences. It is the prime legitimation of racial capitalism. Tomaselli dives into the idea that racism acts as a means of justification spanning from the ages of slavery to the modern day, an act done by those in power. Here's an illustration. All of this shows that black people are fitted for fewer roles, which is a pattern of structural racism in the film industry and the pattern of media presentation, which is another theme Tomaselli discusses about power dynamics with the Spanish caste system mentioned earlier and the blacks in the film industry. An author who studied racism explains it best in their reading where one group is politically, socially, and economically dominant, members of stigmatized groups bombarded with negative messages about their own worth. The author highlights the downsides faced by ethnic groups in general, but this remains evident among African Americans in the film industry. According to Categorically Unequal, Massey Douglas S. states, although obvious and glaring in principle, the mechanisms of stratification employed in the Jim Crow South are quite general and operate at some level in all human societies. The author argues about the implications of segregation as a tactic by people in power, concepts at play in the film media and the film industry. In summary, people of African American descent in the film industry were portrayed as unequal due to stereotypes. Throughout the course of time, African American individuals were portrayed as unequal, with white individuals playing black roles. There were multiple practices non whites took in the film industry to portray blacks that were deemed offensive, such as blackface. They would put on a facade like using makeup and overly exaggerated acting skills to portray blacks on the big screen, which is deemed extremely offensive and not allowed in modern day society. Author named Matthew Huey explains it in detail in his work. According to the article titled Cinematic Racism, White Redemption, and Black Stereotypes in Magical Negro Films, he states Sterling Brown described these stereotypes as falling into seven categories: the contented enslaved person, the wretched freeman, the comic Negro, page 572. Huey explores the concept of African Americans in the film industry by highlighting the different ways they were denied not just there but everywhere else. Here is a illustration. The repetition of the stereotypes mentioned above, combined with the uneven treatment of blacks on top of the ability to be cast, all showcase the prominent negativities of structural racism. With the development of the film industry and how offensive it was towards the African Americans, a pertinent topic called assimilation is a concept relied on. Assimilation is like an animal adapting to a new environment and to physical and environmental changes. An individual adopts new cultures, music, or clothing to adapt or thrive in new surroundings. An author explains it like assimilation is the process whereby the boundary between mainstream and margin blurs, disappears, or paradoxically is reinforced. The media presence was like a sponge, much like the casting system of society and the film industry. Blacks only received roles that fit the current class system, which is why this is both offensive and racist on top of the blackface. According to Doing Gender, Doing Class, the performance of sexuality in exotic dance clubs, Mary Nell Trotner states performances of passive desire and distance characterize the middle class clubs, while the working class clubs are marked with explicit allusions to sex and sexuality, physical activity, and exertion, and contact between patron and dancer. These practices induce segregation as they limit and separate what people of different colors can and can't do, which are struggles shown in the film industry as well as today. In conclusion, African Americans portrayed on the big screen were treated as unequal due to whites playing as blacks. Throughout the course of time, people of African American descent in films were portrayed as unequal due to the lack of diversity. According to the article Developing a Course on American Diversity with an Emphasis on Film by Brian C. Johnson, he states emphasis will be on how these categories have been coded in Hollywood mainstream film to perpetuate stereotypes and maintain hierarchical social status and power. Here's an illustration. An author who studied racism explains it best in the reading. According to the reading titled Racism Definitions, it states when organizations, businesses, or institutions like schools and police departments discriminate either deliberately or indirectly against certain groups of people to limit their rights. The concept of diversity and the concept of racism are intertwined because they both induce prejudice among individuals and hide their true personas. This is a theme shown in another article also at play in the modern day. According to Peter L. Berger and Thomas Luckman's The Social Construction of Reality, they state, all the same, if the reality of every day is to be understood, account must be taken of its intrinsic character before we proceed with sociological analysis proper. The author describes a neutral environment with little to no diversity, which was often shown in movie scenes during this time since most roles were given to white people, showcasing how racist and not diverse the environment was. In conclusion, African Americans were portrayed as unequals due to the lack of diversity. Life is complicated. People treat others based on appearance, which is an unfair way of life, as mentioned with the lives of many African Americans in this industry. Being a non white person is difficult, especially in predominantly white areas, and one is sometimes treated as an outsider when one does not align with the society, which is structural racism. Over the years, society portrayed African Americans as unequal as a result of structural racism. This showed practices of segregation and separation just because they come from a different part of the world or have a different skin color. While it often carries negative meaning, the experiences shape individuals to stop the use of blackface in the media industry, which has shaped it into what it is today, which is a way to ensure everyone has a voice no matter their skin color or differences. African Americans were treated terribly in this process, as stated. They weren't granted job opportunities in the film industry, therefore reducing the diversity on set. This was also primarily because the white actors were wearing makeup to make themselves look African American, which is both an act of segregation and an act of racism. Throughout the course of time, African American individuals were portrayed as unequal, which is a pattern that occurs with stereotypes, white individuals playing black roles, and the lack of diversity. Here is my works cited. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.